Allstate wants to remind fans that mayhem is everywhere. Like when your fantasy league meets up at your house. Everything's great until the hot plate gets too hot for the tablecloth. Now your kitchen's up in smoke. And if you don't have the right home insurance coverage, the cost to fix this is anything but a fantasy. So switch to Allstate, save money, and get protected from mayhem like this. Not available in every state based on coverage selected, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Savings vary.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. People always say it's good to unwind, but that's easier said than done. The exception, Chumba Casino. They actually make it easier done than said, or at least the same. Chumba Casino is an online social casino with hundreds of casino-style games like slots and blackjack. Play for fun. Play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. Sign up now and collect your free welcome bonus at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to DBR Bites, episode number 57. We're here on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024, just after Labor Day. Donald here. I got Jason with me. Jason, how you doing this afternoon? It's early afternoon. I know you're just now coming into the home from the office.
Yeah. I just got done with my day at CNN. Another day of covering the U.S. political race. We won't get into politics at all, but that is what I spend my days doing. Tracking the various statements and such of the political candidates. My day's going just fine. I'm actually about to take off. Going to be leaving Atlanta for a couple weeks to head to the Jersey Shore. I'll be hanging out on the beach. I'll be hitting the Atlantic City casinos.
If you hit the Vegas ones, it's not a quick trip from Atlantic City. So just putting that out there for you.
Right. No, this is an easy one. And folks may recall, or they may not, a year ago at this time, when I was at the Jersey Shore last time, Con Knuppel completely surprised us and committed. We ended up recording one of the worst podcasts we've ever done, where we completely butchered his name. I tried to do research into his family on the fly and got it totally wrong. It was just, I was like, I think this is his mom. It was like it was his aunt. I had it all wrong, but that's how surprised we were. So maybe when I'm up in New Jersey this time, we'll get some recruiting news. That'd be nice, huh?
I would say don't wait by your computer, but if there is some surprise between now and when you get back, we will be here to recap it on the DBR podcast. But for now, let's talk about football, because football is coming up this weekend. The Duke Blue Devils traveled to Evanston, Illinois, just outside Chicagoland, to visit the Northwestern Wildcats. And Jason, the first thing we need to start before we get into the actual game is that, as we kind of alluded to on the last episode, Northwestern's in a new temporary home down by the lake, Ryan Field, which was open for 98 years. I've been there. Jason, I don't know if you had been to Ryan Field, one of the, not a, premier stadium, but one of the, cool stadiums to visit, especially considering the history behind it. And it has been torn down. They are building a new Ryan Field in its place, which will be open in 2026. In the meantime, Northwestern is calling Martin Stadium home, which is the home of their soccer and lacrosse teams. They kind of expanded it from 3,800 seats to 16,000 seats. It will be that way for the next couple of years. It's similar to what Hawaii did with their soccer lacrosse stadium when they vacated Aloha Stadium. They are building a new Aloha Stadium that should be open sometime in the next couple of years. And so they're doing something similar. And so in the meantime, it'll be a unique way to experience a football game, but also for the Duke Blue Devils, they're not entering a big stadium that's going to be a raucous crowd. They're entering a smaller stadium, more compact. Fans are going to be there, and it might be in ways louder because the fans are right on top of the action. But that's something that they kind of have to understand. It's going to be a little bit different, Jason, than some of their games that they will see the rest of the year.
Yeah, and by the way, it's worth noting that the stadium is right next to Lake, I guess it's Lake Michigan. Yeah.
Yes,
right?
Lake Michigan.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Right next to the lake. It's incredibly picturesque. But it's unlike what you're used to seeing. The stands are so much smaller. They don't extend nearly as high. It's a, I don't want to say it's a high school look, because it's not. It looks really cool. It's bigger than most high school stadiums are. Aren't more than 16,000 seats for the most part, I don't think.
Unless you're in Texas. Yeah.
Right, exactly right. So it's not quite high school, but it's different. It's smaller than just about anything else probably Duke has played in decades. But it's a really cool situation. I'm not saying it's something you should do permanently. I'm not saying it's necessarily something that Duke should look at for Wally Wade. But it's kind of cool, and I'm interested to see it on TV this week, and you know, catch a glance at how it looks, and perhaps more importantly, see if maybe, I don't know, does the wind off the lake? There are all kinds of things that could impact the game that are unforeseen at this moment.
I went to Hawaii a couple of years ago with my dad, and we went to a game at the Clarence Ching Complex, which is where they are playing temporarily. And I will say the one thing that Duke will need to understand, and it kind of is a segue into this game, is that the sightlines, as you mentioned, are going to be super different. How different are they going to be? Normally in some of these football stadiums, when you look above the offensive line, you don't see fans because the fans are a little bit further up. There's like a wall or something like that. So yes, you may look around and see the fans, but in your line of sight when you are playing the game, you don't see fans. And in this case, they absolutely will, because the fans are right there. In fact, sitting in the front row, if you're a fan, actually sucks because you are below the line, the 6'10" linemen that are on the sideline blocking your view of the game. So it's not actually a great sight line for you if you're really close to the action. But I will say, Jason, it kind of affected Northwestern as well, because Northwestern in their first game against Miami, Ohio this past weekend, they only won 13-6, and they're favored to beat them by more than that. Miami, Ohio is no slouch, but Northwestern is supposed to beat a team like that, especially in the opening game of the season. And so that kind of leads into what Northwestern does. So, Jason, I'll start with you because I have some notes on the offensive defense, but start with the offense, led by Mike Wright, their quarterback, who's kind of a dual threat option here. Tell me about the offense and what we can see from Northwestern when we play them on Friday night.
Yeah, I spent some time doing a little bit of a deep dive on Northwestern because they're sort of an intriguing team. They brought in, so the head coach, David Braun, who was there a year ago. Remember, there was some very weird circumstances. I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but it was a bit of a messy transition, so to speak. But David Braun took over the program. They struggled last year. They didn't have a very good season. And one of the things he's done in the offseason is he brought in a brand new offensive coordinator. It's a guy named Zach Lujan, who was the offensive coordinator at San Diego State. San Diego State was the FCS, not the big division, but the smaller Division I, the FCS national champions 2 years in a row on the back of what this guy did for their offensive scheme. And he brought with him something that's called the wide zone. It's a system designed to spread out the defense and create lots of cutback opportunities for the running back. It's rather than the running back constantly going vertical, he goes horizontal a good bit and looks for spots. The line tries to spread things out, and he looks for spots he can cut back. I want to note, when Zach Lujan was at San Diego State, they went 15-0 last year, and they rushed for more than 225 yards per game. So this wide zone system that he's running, which is something more and more NFL teams are trying as well, this wide zone system could be really effective. And in their first game this year, Northwestern rushed for more than 150 yards. Now, like you say, it was against Miami of Ohio, a good MAC team, but not a power conference team. But still, that's an impressive rush total. But here's the caveat. A lot of that rush total came from the QB. You mentioned a dual threat guy, Mike Wright. He scrambled for more than 60 yards this past week. I say scrambled, but it wasn't all, just busted plays that he turns into positive plays. A lot of it is he's really great at hiding the ball and pulling it out so he can run with it. He'll put it in a running back's belly and then pull it out at the last minute when he sees what the defense is doing. He is really quick. You should expect at least a half dozen designed runs for him in the game, plus probably a couple other plays where he turns a negative play into positive yards with his scrambling. He is certainly someone capable of ripping off 30, 40, 50-yard runs. He's done that in each of the past few seasons. At other schools. He was at Vandy and Ole Miss or Mississippi, maybe Mississippi State, I think. I forget. But in any event, this is a guy who's been around a good bit and is now at Northwestern. And he's someone who is very capable of beating you with his legs more so than his arm. He isn't super accurate as a quarterback, And I noticed, I watched about 10 minutes of his highlights for the Miami of Ohio game, and he tends to go for quick hitter passes. Like I only saw like
Lots
two or
of
three
slants
balls.
and quick outs.
Yeah, I only saw like 2 or 3 balls that he threw more than 10 yards, and one of those was sort of on a busted play where he was scrambling, and the defense was having to adjust to him, and a guy popped open like 15 yards downfield. But in terms of like designed passes, sort of past the first down marker, there were very few of those from Northwestern with Mike Wright at quarterback. So if not Mike Wright, the other guy who you're going to hear about in this game is Cam Porter, who was their starting running back a year ago, and he's the guy who gets most of the carries in this new wide zone running scheme that they've got. All that said about the Northwestern offense, as you mentioned, they only put up 13 points on Miami of Ohio last week. They've got a strong defense, but the offense, frankly, considering how good Duke's defense appears to be, I think Northwestern is really going to struggle. And, it is worth mentioning, Donald, a year ago, Duke curb stomped Northwestern.
Yes.
Arguably our best game of the season. Arguably, perhaps, the best game of Riley Leonard's Duke career. Duke won 38-14. And Riley Leonard threw for 219 yards and rushed for 97 yards. That's over 300 yards of offense all by himself, and he had 2 TDs. Duke only had 1 punt in that entire game on our way to scoring 38 points. I think that would be a very good sign. If we could duplicate that, I would be quite happy this Friday.
That's a good goal, Jason. And also, you never want to regress, right? You want to be better than you were the year before. So that means we should be getting 39 points, 40 points, 41 points. But I think,
I'll take 35.
35 is fine. I'll take a victory. I'll take 2-0 victory. But I think one thing on offense that you mentioned, right? I think the one thing that people need to realize is that Mike Wright, his offense is generated by, as you mentioned, deception and not necessarily trickery, but like option plays are ones that require you to hesitate on defense. You have to make sure that you're hitting the right guy with the ball, right? You don't want to hit some guy and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's great. I tackle some guy, 15 yards on the backfield, but the ball is 15 yards downfield. And that's what he kind of is able to open lanes by just making you hesitate ever so much. And then again, you either have a quick slant or again, he has a couple of design plays where he can do a QB draw and then run up the gut or run to the sideline, do option plays and the such. So that's something to, necessarily, for our defense to kind of hone in and kind of play that contain that they did very well against Elon, because I thought they did very good at that. And they need to continue that against Northwestern. But I think, Jason, on offense, the one thing also is that Bryce Kurtz is a deep threat. And he can get downfield if you need him to.
Wide receiver,
The wide receiver, 6 receptions for 91 yards last week. He averaged 15 yards a catch. So he's a guy who can get down quickly and he could break tackles. So the guys in secondary, if the ball does get into the secondary, wrap up, tackle, make sure that there are no yards after the catch. I will say on the defensive side of the ball for Northwestern, they have a couple of guys that are pretty good. And 4 sacks last week, 6 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, and 5 passes defended, and they only allowed, as you mentioned, 40 rush yards. So, one of the keys, we'll talk about what Duke needs to do next after the break. But, we did mention the fact that Duke struggled running the ball, and this is a team that is very good at containing the run. So I'm looking at those 2 things on Northwestern side, especially on defense, where if we can get big plays and get downfield, that'll help. But I think the one thing is they're going to try and establish the fact that they control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and it's incumbent on our offensive line to really push them around.
Yeah, and on defense, they return most of their front line from a season ago, and they were good, not great, but they were a good defensive team last year. They gave up about 22.5 points per game. Again, that's like a decent number. It's not a terrible number, but it's not like super elite. I mean, it's worth noting they play in the Big Ten, so I think they played Penn State. I forget who else they played a couple pretty good teams last year in the Big Ten. I don't think they had Ohio State, but they played some pretty good teams. And then the other thing about them on defense is last year they had like a top 15 pass defense in terms of yards allowed from the passing game, but like I think 3 of their top defensive backs all hit the portal and went to other schools. And so it's a little uncertain. I don't know how much you can judge off that Miami of Ohio game, the same way I don't know how much you can judge off of Duke's game over Elon. It's just a completely different caliber of opponent when you're playing a Power Five kind of team. Vegas right now, by the way, Donald, Vegas says Northwestern's about a 2.5, 3-point favorite in this game. I think that's all the home field. Like generally home field's worth about 4 points. If this was being played on a neutral field, I think Duke would be a small favorite, point, maybe a 1.5 kind of thing. This will be probably a tough game. Don't let last year's 38-14 shellacking fool you.
And Sagarin, we mentioned Jeff Sagarin has a rating system for college football. Northwestern 74 in that ranking, Duke is 75. So this is as pick 'em as you can get for a college football game.
Total toss up. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one last point on the defense. You mentioned some of their defensive line and how much, the experience they have. One thing that was interesting about the Miami of Ohio game, and again, there's not a lot to take from that particular game, but one thing that you want a defense to have is your linebackers and defensive line to lead your team in tackles, not your D-backs. The defensive backs were 1, 2, 4, and 5 on the list of number of tackles, most tackles by individuals on a team. So if your defensive backs, and yes, that means a couple of them are kind of squeezing in and maybe doing some blitzes and showing some of those pass rush things. But your defensive back should not be leading your team in tackles because that means the ball is getting downfield. That is something that I'm sure Duke is looking at to say, okay, how did they get to this point where the defensive backs were leading the charge and stopping the ball? And how do we get it where they're the ones that are ending up getting tired? Because a lot of teams have a lot of cover at defensive line and linebackers. They can cycle guys in and out. But the depth concerns that most teams have is in their secondary. And if you get those guys tired, there's not a lot of guys that can come in and service them while they get refreshed. So again, that's something we can exploit, especially with Malik Murphy, who we know can throw the ball downfield. So that's something that we should look at as we move forward. Let's take a quick break. On the other side, we will talk more about what Duke needs to do on their side of the ball to win against Northwestern. So stick around.
Want to earn some quick cash? Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston is stocking up on cute and cozy fall styles. We pay you on the spot for your gently used name brand clothes and accessories. Plus, while you're here, you can stock up on must-have looks for autumn. We're the go-to sustainable shopping spot for teens and young adults. So stop by Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston today and refresh your wardrobe. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue. Want to earn some quick cash? Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston is stocking up on cute and cozy fall styles. We pay you on the spot for your gently used name brand clothes and accessories. Plus, while you're here, you can stock up on must-have looks for autumn. We're the go-to sustainable shopping spot for teens and young adults. So stop by Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston today and refresh your wardrobe. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
We're back, and Jason, we are going to shift gears for just a few minutes and talk about what Duke needs to do. We've talked about Northwestern when they have the football on their side of the field, but what does Duke need to do to win this game? And Jason, I start with this. The run game is one thing that we relied on a lot last year, despite the fact that we had an elite quarterback in Riley Leonard, but the running game did not do as well against Elon last weekend. They only had 50 yards rushing. And that's something that we were expecting, some at least over 100 yards. But, we were used to, having games where they were having closer to 200 yards rushing and really establishing that run. I didn't see a lot of Northwestern this past weekend, but I think the main goal here, the main key is if Duke can get the running game going, that is really going to affect Northwestern and what they do on defense.
Yeah, there's no way you can understate how important it is to have a good run game. Mm-hmm. And especially because Duke doesn't have the release valve that it's had in recent years with guys like Riley Leonard, guys like Daniel Jones, and a litany of other quarterbacks who are capable of doing it on their feet. Because Malik Murphy's that's not his game. And it's not something that Duke is going to call on him to do. So yeah, we've got experienced linemen on the offensive line. We have two experienced running backs, both the guys were not starters, but had tons of carries last year for their respective teams. And Duke's just got to figure out a way to do better than we did against Elon. I think if Duke is again, below 2.5 yards per carry, we're just putting a lot of pressure on Malik Murphy to have a big game throwing the ball to Duke's wide receivers. And I just don't know that he's gonna be able to do that against a power conference kind of team if we can't offset it with the run a little bit. The other thing I'm interested in seeing with Murphy is whether Duke continues to really fling it downfield a lot. I said it against Elon. I think that we did it a little tiny bit too much. On the other hand, every time you connect on one of those, it's huge because he was throwing every one of those were 30 plus yards downfield. Those are the definition of chunk plays. But I'll be really interested in seeing if Duke is able to succeed at that against a power conference team, and B, if Duke maybe tries a little something different with Malik Murphy, a few more shorter balls, because frankly, if your run game isn't working and you're only really just bombing it way downfield, you're allowing the defense to pin their ears back and come after you. Duke did a great job of not having Malik Murphy get on his butt at all in the game against Elon. Northwestern's going to be a different animal. Not that they're a great rushing the passer team, but they're going to be better than Elon.
They're going to be better and they're going to be bigger. And I think that's the idea here. But also, Jason, that was the other thing on offense I'm really looking forward to seeing is, again, we talked about it was a matter of timing, right? The timing was just not quite there. And okay, that's cool close, for the first week of the season. A lot of them, again, hitting fingertips or just out of the reach. And you're like, okay, if they had, it's the game of inches speech from Any Given Sunday. Half a second, too close or too far, you don't quite make it. You don't quite catch it. But I think the one thing that you were mentioning is the reason why I think we did it a little too much is because normally a team is trying to establish their run to open up their pass game. And once that really didn't work for us, we started to use the pass game in the hopes that we could open up our run game through the pass. And by having them go deep and saying if a couple of those balls are caught, then those defensive backs have to step back a little bit. Those linebackers have to drop back a little bit further into coverage. And that opens some gaps maybe for our run game to shine. And so that's why I think establishing the run is most important, because the passing is always going to be there. Opening getting, as you said, 3 to 4 yards of rush instead of 2 yards of rush. That's going to open so much more up. And it's not just the deep ball, it's that medium ball, that 10-yard to 15-yard, first down, 1st and 10, you sling it, basically to the sticks, and there's plenty of room to catch it and again reset. So I'm looking to see if that timing is better, because obviously you want that to improve, but really establishing the run game to set up our pass game is really going to open things up, in my opinion, because last week it felt like we had to kind of, flip that. And while I thought we were still successful, it could have been a lot better. And I think the other thing that I have is on defense. Defense, get off the field, because I think the one thing is if you limit Mike Wright's big ability to make big plays, both in the air and on the ground, you get them off the field, and then our offense has more chances to work. And I think that's where, having a tired defense with how fast our offense works, right? We talked about that as well. If they're on the field a long period of time, they're just going to be gassed. And as I mentioned, there's not a lot of, in college game, there's just not a lot of depth at some of these positions where they can just sit there and just cycle guys in and out, cycle in 4 or 5 guys to keep everybody fresh. At some point, these guys are going to get tired because of how quickly we operate. And if we can get the defense to get 3 and outs and get off the field, that's going to get us great field position. And it's also going to give the offense more time to tire them out.
Yeah, your point about the defense is a very good one. And the thing I would add to it is this. Last week, Duke did a truly outstanding, remarkable job containing Elon sort of in the box. We talked so much about, 16 tackles for loss. Elon averaged, I want to say it was 0.8 yards per carry.
8 sacks. So,
yeah, exactly. Duke's front 7, Duke's linemen and linebackers against the creativity and the legs of Mike Wright probably determines this game, in my opinion. If you and I are here over the weekend talking about a game where Mike Wright's total offense, passing and running was in the 150 kind of range, Northwestern has lost this football game. If on the other hand, we're talking about him in the 250s, Duke probably lost the game. And I think a ton of it is going to come down to, are you able to control his running attack? This is a guy who probably is going to try and rush, for around 10 carries over the course of the game. If he's, if you keep him under like 30, 40 yards, Northwestern will be in real trouble. If he's up at 70, 80 yards, which he could totally be, then Duke's probably in trouble.
The great thing about this is, even though we have a new head coach, a new defensive scheme, these are guys where most of these guys are used to playing a quarterback that can run the ball, because, as you mentioned, we've basically over the last decade have had nothing but quarterbacks that can also run the ball. Yeah. So they're used to that sort of preparation and having to go against that in practice. Now, how do they figure to rekindle that and make it where they can keep him, within the margins, keep him within that tackle box, and really make him make bad decisions with the football. Miami of Ohio wasn't able to do that, but Duke is able to do that. And if we can force some turnovers, force some bad plays and pressures, and get Northwestern's offense off the field, we're in good shape. Again, Northwestern, as you mentioned, Jason, 2.5 point favorites, according to ESPN, BetMGM, and Caesars. I checked; they're all the same. So get your wager responsibly. But 2.5 point favorites for Northwestern. Duke, according to ESPN's matchup predictor, 45.7% chance to win. But as we said, that means it's just basically a toss up. We're going to be in a nice little van down by the lake on Friday night, 9 p.m., I believe, is the start time on the East Coast. So it's a late one, but everyone make sure it's Friday night. So you don't have to go to work on Saturday. You can sleep in a little bit and then watch the rest of college football. But until then, Jason, anything else before we wrap up?
No, that's about it, man. The only thing I would add is if you go look for it on ESPN, you won't find it. It's on Fox Sports.
It's on Fox Sports. There you go. Oh, yeah, that's right, because it's a Big Ten game, so Big Ten at home on Fox. So is it Big Fox or is it FS1?
It's FS1.
FS1. Okay. So, might need to dig a little bit lower in the channel guide. It's not in the local channels. But again, 9 p.m. start time on FS1. Duke versus Northwestern at the not Ryan Field, Martin Field over by the lake there in suburban Chicago. But that will do it for.
Yeah, wait.
Oh, wait.
I'm going to make a prediction.
Go ahead.
Eli Pancall. Eli's going to have at least 100 yards receiving this game and a touchdown. My man is back in action, and he's primed. He is primed, I'm telling you.
I like that. I like that prediction, because you know why? I think Jordan Moore is also going to go for 100. If we have two guys over 100, we're winning this ball game. That's how that's going to work. So I hope both of our predictions are right, because hopefully that means Duke goes 1-0 on Friday night, actually 2-0 for Friday nights on the seasons thus far. But we will be back after college football, probably this weekend, to recap everything. But until then, that's Jason. I'm Donald. This has been DBR Bites episode number 58. And now it is time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.